easy, boy. Take it easy. Doc's on his way. Yeah, I know. What do you think, Doc?
Well, it's colic. He's pretty sick. He's got in his old head he can't even get up, so he won't try. Sergeant, I don't think he's going to make it through the night.
Can you give him something for the pain?
I can. It's going to be a long night, you know. You probably ought to turn in.
It's all the same to you, Doc. I'll stay here with him.
Well, you suit yourself, but with that medicine, he won't even know you're here.
I'll know I'm here.
Poor old Comanche. Time's the enemy. Well, good night, Sergeant.
The hell it is.
Would you mind if I stayed here with you? Thank you. It's true, you know. What my father told me as a boy. If you're one of those people who has to surround himself with living things, surely gonna have to watch him die someday. It's his time, Sergeant.
According to Comanche's service record, he was born in 1862. His name wasn't Comanche then. He was a bang-tailed colt foaled by a Mustang mare somewhere in Montana high country. Like most newborns, he kicked and pranced at his mother's side. By the time he was weaned, he had developed muscular legs, a deep chest, and a strong back. He had a black mane and tail and a broad forehead with a white star marking. He ran free until he was a 6-year-old. Then in 1868, he was captured by horse hunters in a wild horse roundup along with 30 others. Mustangers heard the U.S. Army was paying good money for remounts. They decided to break a string of wild ones. Comanche was the first they cut out, but he had other ideas. The took 4 cowboys and 4 days to tame Comanche down. The first was a long cowboy from Texas. Then came a short one from Arizona. Then came another Texan. The fourth was called Lucky. Not today. When they finally got Comanche tamed down, they loaded him and 30 others aboard a train headed for Fort Leavenworth. Comanche hated it. He also hated it when they offloaded him in Fort Leavenworth and burned a U.S. brand high on his left shoulder. A brand he would wear proudly for 23 years. Soon after Comanche became the property of the U.S. Army, a young cavalry officer named Tom Custer rode in one rainy day to buy remounts for the 7th Cavalry. Tom Custer, the younger brother of General George Armstrong Custer, was the only man in the Civil War to win 2 Congressional Medals of Honor. Tom would later die with his famous brother in 1876 at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. But this was May 14th, 1868, and today Tom was a horse trader. He paid $90 for Comanche, bargained for the other 30 and loaded them back aboard the cattle cars and headed for Ellis, Kansas to join the 7th Cavalry. Another train ride. The train arrived in Ellis, Kansas on May 19th, 1868. You won't find it in the record books, but soon after their arrival, Custer sold Comanche to Captain Myles Keogh, a native of Ireland. He was also a veteran of the Civil War, where he gained the rank of brevet lieutenant colonel for gallantry at Gettysburg. He would be back in action 2 months later, this time astride Comanche. September 13th, 1868. That was the day Keogh's favorite war horse was to get his name. Legend has it that Keogh's sergeant said that when the arrow hit the horse, he yelled like a Comanche, and that's how he got his name. About 3 months later, Captain Keogh was riding Comanche in action against an Indian raiding party. This time, Comanche was wounded in his right leg. He was lame for several weeks. In 1871, Comanche, Keogh, and the 7th were ordered to the southern states to quell a disturbance between the Ku Klux Klan and northern carpetbaggers. In Kentucky on January 28, 1873, while the 7th Cavalry was chasing moonshiners, Comanche was shot in the left shoulder, but it healed quickly with the help of Captain Keogh. Early in 1873, the 7th was ordered to guard a Northern Pacific Railroad survey party of what was to become known as the Yellowstone Expedition. By the summer of 1875, Keogh and Comanche were back with the regiment trying to run off miners from the gold fields in the Black Hills of Montana. The miners and settlers were ignoring the Laramie Treaty of 1868. The Sioux considered the Black Hills sacred and were killing many intruders. They would kill many more. In May of 1876, the cavalry joined a large campaign against the Sioux. 3 large columns of troopers converged on Indian country. The strongest column, under Brigadier General Alfred Terry, marched west from Fort Lincoln. The backbone of Terry's forces was George Armstrong Custer's 7th Cavalry, including Captain Keogh riding Comanche. They pushed through the Badland regions of Dakota and Montana and emerged into the valley of the Powder River near the bend of the Yellowstone. When fresh Indian signs were found, Terry, Custer, and their staff officers met aboard the steamer Far West, lying along the bank of the Yellowstone. It was decided that Custer and the 7th Cavalry would push up the Rosebud, cross the Wolf Mountains, and move on to the Little Bighorn from the south. As the only newspaperman with the 7th Cavalry, Mark Kellogg was working far into the night, finishing a long dispatch to the New York Herald describing the events of the last few days and what was likely to come. As for Custer, he wrote, "He is a man of strong impulses, of great friendships and bitter enemies. He is a brave, faithful, gallant soldier with the ambition to succeed in all things. He is respected and beloved by his command, who would freely go with him into the jaws of hell." 300 miles away, Libby Custer, the general's wife, was penning a letter to the only man she ever loved.
My own darling, I dream of you as I know I should. Oh, Audie, your safety is ever on my mind. My dreams, my prayers are all for you. God bless and keep you, my darling. Ever your own, Libby.
Early on a June morning in 1876, the 7th Cavalry headed up the Rosebud. Unbeknown to Custer and the others, one of the greatest concentrations of Indians ever gathered was waiting in the valley of the Little Bighorn. 12,000 Indians, including 2,000 warriors. On the night before the battle, officers' call was sounded and Custer's commanders gathered in groups around the general's bed. When all were assembled, Custer told them that until further orders, trumpet calls would not be sounded unless in an extreme emergency. He took particular pain to impress on his officers his reliance on their judgment and loyalty. All officers were requested to make any suggestions they saw fit to make. This talk was considered something extraordinary for General Custer. It was not his habit to unburden himself to his officers. There was something indefinable that was not Custer. There was a certain pleading in his voice that made a deep impression on all. After the meeting, one of Benteen's officers was heard to say, "I never heard Custer talk that way. I believe the general is going to be killed." On Sunday, June 25, 1876, General George Armstrong Custer and every officer and enlisted man of his command were killed at the Little Bighorn. According to Little Soldier, a Sioux warrior, Keogh fought gallantly, charging headlong into withering gunfire time and time again, until Comanche was cut from under him. Even then, he fought on foot like a man possessed until the very end. Just before he died, he crawled on his hands and knees to the fallen Comanche and held on to his reins, knowing that no matter how badly in need of a horse, no Indian would take the mount of a dead man. 2 days after the Custer battle, a burial party moved in and found Comanche more dead than alive, with 7 bullet wounds. The poor fellow was too weak to stand.
Okay, boy, come on. Come on. Let's get up there, boy.
Only after some gentle urging they managed to get him on his feet. Once up, Comanche was led about 15 miles to where the steamer Far West was moored. There the horse was bedded down along with 52 wounded soldiers of Major Reno's command. All aboard, the steamer headed for Fort Lincoln. The journey took 54 hours. When they got there, Comanche was too weak to walk. A number of horse soldiers loaded him in a wagon and took him to the stables. Comanche was placed in a sling and nursed back to health. By the spring of 1877, nearly a year after the Custer battle, Comanche was well enough to be led out onto the fort parade ground to listen to Colonel Samuel Sturgis, who would assume command of the 7th Cavalry, read General Order Number 7.
Order! Home!
1. The horse known as Comanche, being the only living representative of the bloody tragedy of the Little Bighorn, Montana, June 25, 1876. His kind treatment and comfort should be a special pride and solicitude on the part of the 7th Cavalry, to the end that his life may be prolonged to the utmost limit. Wounded and scarred as he is, his very silence speaks more eloquently than words of the desperate struggle against overwhelming numbers, of the hopeless conflict, and of the heroic manner in which all went down on that fatal day. 2. The commanding officer of Troop I will see that a special and comfortable stall is fitted up for him, and he will not be ridden by any person whatsoever under any circumstances, nor will he be put to any kind of work. Hereafter, upon all occasions of ceremony of mounted regimental formation, Comanche, saddled, bridled, draped in mourning, and led by a mounted trooper of Troop I, will be paraded with the regiment by command of Colonel Samuel Sturgis.
There were those who claimed one of the reasons for Colonel Sturgis's special treatment of Comanche stemmed from the fact that he had lost a son at the Little Bighorn. And Comanche might very well have been the last to see his boy alive. After General Order Number 7 was issued, the horse was allowed the complete freedom of the post and was a treasured pet of the soldiers. For the most part, Comanche behaved like a good soldier, occasionally sneaking off to the enlisted men's canteen for a poker game and a bucket of beer. When the bugle sounded for squadron formation, the old boy would trot to his place and stand at attention. Whenever the 7th Cavalry went into the field, Comanche would go along at the head of the column. In 1888, the 7th Cavalry was ordered back to Fort Riley, Kansas. Each June 25th was the official regimental day of mourning, and a ceremonial parade was held. Comanche was led at the head of Captain Keogh's old troop, draped in black net with stirrups reversed and a pair of empty boots in the stirrups. You won't find this in the history books, but the story goes that General Order Number 7 was broken only once. It seemed that the post commander's daughter, a 7-year-old, had one day wandered off the post to pick flowers. Comanche remained in good health at Fort Riley until late in 1890, when the 7th was ordered to the Pine Ridge Agency in South Dakota. Some say that Comanche went along with the regiment. He didn't. He was getting old. Late in the evening, he would wander onto the parade ground. The 12 wounds he had received in battle had taken their toll on the old warrior. And try as he may to maintain his dignity, he limped pretty bad. Some said it was the west wind that brought tears to Comanche's eyes. But I know better. I know he was remembering his master, Captain Keogh, who he loved and lost along with Tom Custer and the others that terrible day at the Little Bighorn. At 1:30 a.m. on November 7th, 1891, Comanche died. I loved him.